you ever felt like everyone you know is ahead of you in life and you just feel terribly behind? You can change that. It's pretty simple, sort of. But before you can make that change, you need to know these 4 things. Why you feel behind, the story you need to hear, why being behind is good, and how you can apply this to your life. Has this ever happened to you? You finish work, get home, and think to yourself, I'm gonna make myself a healthy dinner, but I'm just gonna relax a little bit first. And then bam, it's 10 p.m. and you've been doom scrolling social media for 4 hours. How does this even happen? Well, it happens because these apps are optimized for our attention. They're designed for us to get stuck on them. And so all we see are people doing fun, cool things, cooler things than we're doing, and we're stuck at home or work. So of course we start to feel behind. But us feeling behind leads to another negative feedback loop. We want an escape because we're not doing what we wanted to do. And so we go doom scroll social media. And then when we're done that, we still feel bad. And we want an escape from that. And then we go back to doom scrolling social media. Suddenly it's 3 a.m. and it's too late and you should be in bed, but you're not, and you're gonna be tired of work tomorrow. So we need to break out of that cycle. We need to break out of that loop. And in order to do that, I need to tell you the story of someone who didn't have her first job until the age of 54. Her name was Frances Hesselbein. And if you haven't heard of her before, you need to. Nobody would have expected that much from her. But what happened next in her life is truly unbelievable because her life was entirely unremarkable. She dropped out of college to help her family after her father passed away. She never had a job outside of supporting her husband. She lived in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, where racism was ever present. So when her husband called out a teacher for kicking 2 black kids off of a playground, that teacher called him a traitor. And then, randomly, in her 30s and 40s, she started volunteering for the Girl Scouts. But at the age of 54, when most people are contemplating retirement, her professional career began. Her first job was to be the executive director for the local Girl Scout Council. But by 1972, the Girl Scouts organization was going south. It wasn't able to keep up with a rapidly changing society for women. The national CEO position went vacant for an entire year. But in 1976, an unlikely candidate became the newest CEO, Frances. And the Girl Scouts took off. Under her leadership, they added 130,000 volunteers and tripled minority membership. And she didn't do any of this to build wealth or social standing. She did this because of her experience in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, the black kids getting kicked off the playground. She did it because she wanted to ensure that every girl in America could see themselves as a Girl Scout. And as a final stamp of approval, the godfather of business management himself, Peter Drucker, called her the best CEO in America. Frances was a titan in the industry, and yet who would have thought that she would have ended up here? Not her. And then what was it that made her so good at her job? She was a force for inclusion because of her experiences with racism. She was adoptable because of the range of different jobs she had to do to help her husband. She came into the Girl Scouts with less experience than everyone around her. And so she naturally created a culture of shared leadership. And so don't you see, the very thing that makes us feel behind, the meandering and figuring things out, it's the very thing that gets us ahead. And that's why we need range. We need diverse experiences in life. But did you know that sometimes being behind is good? From the book Range by David Epstein, a researcher named Malamud analyzed the data for thousands of students in England and Scotland. In England, the students had to specialize early. They picked in the last 2 years of high school, and that would lead on to their college specialization. In Scotland, students were required to study 2 different fields in their first 2 years of college. In England, you were required to specialize early. In Scotland, you were encouraged to specialize later and to try more things. And so who do you think better? The English kids that were required to specialize early, the kids that were ahead, or the Scots, the ones that were encouraged to try more things, the kids that were behind? Unsurprisingly, the Scots started out with lower income, but then they caught up. Why? They caught up because the English kids had been focused so early. They were required to specialize when they didn't even know what they liked. And so they ended up having to switch their career. They made more mistakes in figuring out what they wanted to do. So even though the English kids started ahead, they fell behind. And that's why we need experiences. We need to have lived life in order to know the answer to questions like, what am I good at? What do I even like? And so sometimes being behind is good. But now that you know this, you need to know how to apply it to your life. So here are the 3 steps you can take. So number 1, social media. And I know this is a little contradictory because you are watching my YouTube video after all, but maybe let's just say my stuff is good stuff, okay? But social media, you need to decide how much you're going to consume of this. and how you're going to implement that in your life. So you can do a bunch of things. You can delete the app. You can put time restrictions in iOS. You can go through your feed and weed out who you follow and just leave inspirational accounts on there. This can take many forms, but you need to decide what boundaries you want to create for yourself around social media, because this is really the impetus for why we feel behind. And number two, and when that inevitable feeling behindness hits, you can remember the story of Frances Hesselbein, and that we need to have lived life. We need to have experience to understand who we are. And this is number three. This is probably the most important part, which is that you can recognize that you need to embrace these experiences in your life. There are two ways you can get to the end goal of your life. You can get there because you've been flogging yourself mercilessly because you always feel behind and you need to catch up to everyone else in front of you. And when you get to that end goal line, when you bust through the ribbon, you'll be completely broken. Or you can choose to enjoy this journey you're on. Choose to enjoy these twists and turns. And instead of getting to the finish line completely battered and broken, you can get there whole and complete. So choose wholeness. Choose to embrace the journey and live your life. But now that you know how to not feel behind, none of this will work unless you know how to chase your dreams. And if you want to learn how to do that, then you need to watch this video.